Burnham Books Media is proud to present A Hijabi's Journey to Live, Laugh, and Love. Written and narrated by Farheen Khan.
Forward. Life is full of challenges. It's how we deal with them that makes us who we are. It's with this thought in mind that I took my first step off the podium at my book launch on March 17, 2010, at the Novotel Hotel in Mississauga, in front of all of my family, my friends, and the many angels that touched my life in so many ways. I made a commitment to myself, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to all those present that I would be grateful for all I had received, that I would find the courage to live each and every moment to its fullest, and to enjoy the happiness which I found, like a person who finds light at the end of a dark tunnel. At that time, and in that moment, when asked about writing another book, I told the many people there that I would not write again until I'd accomplished something great, or I'd experienced enough that I'd feel the need to share my experience again with my friends and family and appreciate their contributions in my life. When asked about a timeline of when I thought this may happen, I answered 5 to 7 years. Now here I am less than 4 years later writing another audio program. This audio program, however, does not span a decade of my life, but rather it's about the last 2.5 years of my life. I never once thought that I'd experienced so much in such a short time. Then again, in the words of Forrest Gump, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Today I sit and write again for the first time in years with the intention of sharing my life experiences in a way that others can relate to. Living the life of a single young Muslim woman activist, I know what it means to be living a life of solitude, reassuring myself over and over that my life is to serve others and not myself. Taking care of others is what's important. I'm not as important. It's about self-sacrifice, and it's about seeking the pleasure and goodwill of others. And of course, of Allah the Almighty. Never once did I believe that life is meant to be lived in a way that allows you to love yourself and to live to your fullest while still being helpful, caring, and compassionate towards others. I always advocated for respect and honor for all, and women in particular, and did my best to give it to others as much as I expected it for myself. But was I really giving myself the kind of respect, honor, and love that I deserved? That was the question. It wasn't until April of 2011 that I realized just how much I had neglected myself in parts of my life. This audio program outlines that journey of finding myself and meeting myself face to face for the first time, and finding the courage and strength to take one small step at a time to love myself in order to experience true happiness, love, and laughter. This audio program is a small window into my heart and the life that I now have. By the end of this audio program, I hope you find the courage within yourself to love and appreciate you in all of who you are. Chapter 1. Evaluating the Purpose of Life. Every choice before you represents the universe inviting you to remember who you are and what you want. Alan Cohen. Life's lessons. Reflect and understand what your purpose in life is. Work hard each day to live your reality, your purpose. Don't judge others. Focus on yourself and your path. People spend their whole lives trying to understand their purpose in life. There are some who never find out why they're really here and live life just going through the motions just to get by. There are others who find their path and work hard each and every day to get there. I'm one of the fortunate individuals that has found my life's purpose and has been able to make it my everyday reality. My name is Farheen Khan, and I was born in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, on October the 17th, 1980. My name, when translated into its root language Persian Farsi, means happiness. Not just happiness for a single person, but happiness that is experienced by a group of people who are feeling the happiness together. My life's purpose, in a very broad sense, is to support, assist, and spread happiness in people's lives and to empower them to make a change in themselves, their own lives, and the lives of those around them for the betterment of all. After 5 years of living my purpose day in and day out, I have reached a point where I need to reevaluate my plan of action and determine what my next steps are moving forward. So what is my life's purpose now? Well, if you'd asked me about 15 years ago at age 16, I would have said that my purpose was to become a doctor and save people's lives each day, to give them an opportunity to live a worry-free, healthy life. 10 years ago, when I was working in corporate Canada, my answer would have been to become the CEO or vice president of a financial corporation and retire with $1 million home on Mississauga Road in Mississauga, facing the lake with 2 cars, one of which would be my all-time favorite Mercedes CLK 320. But life doesn't always work out as we intend it to. We spend our entire lives planning what we want and who we want to be. Especially being born and raised in North America, we're socialized from an early age to really plan our lives. So much so that sometimes children know what they want to be when they grow up, even before they can speak. Like my baby nephew, who wanted to be Bob the Builder years before he could even speak a full sentence. In my previous book, From Behind the Veil, A Hijabi's Journey to Happiness, I spoke a lot about my journey to finding happiness, a journey which was triggered by a very unfortunate series of events that began post 9/11 in the form of gender Islamophobia. My experiences as a Muslim Hijabi woman living in Canada in the post 9/11 reality that Muslim Canadians have been facing for the last 10 years. My path led me from corporate Canada to social justice, ultimately leading me to discover my true purpose in life, which is to serve others and ensure that human rights are upheld for the most marginalized in society. In particular, from the experiences that I've felt or witnessed, it's about working with women and children who are dealing with various forms of abuse. It's about ensuring their safety. Ensuring they have the resources they need to live a peaceful life free of abuse and oppression. It wasn't easy figuring out what I was meant to do, and it took time to narrow it down. At first, my purpose was simply to serve others that are in need, which then evolved further to serve and empower marginalized individuals, in particular abused women and children. When I was at that stage of my purpose analysis, if you can call it that, I did a lot of work empowering youth and raising awareness on poverty and food insecurity, which got me to where I needed to be. Finally, I was able to really focus my efforts on work that was specific to what I wanted, what I enjoyed, and what I was effective at doing, and that was working with women and children fleeing violence. I realized just how much this meant to me when I arrived at my current workplace and was hired as the manager of development at a shelter for abused women and children. In this role, my work involves raising a total of $300,000 over a fiscal year and any and all fundraising development-related tasks for the organization. Prior to working for the Women's Shelter, I worked as the operations manager at the local rape crisis center. In this capacity, my job was to build infrastructure internally as well as raise funds to fill a $120,000 deficit that the agency had incurred in previous years. I've been working in the nonprofit sector since 2007 and have had the pleasure of working with many groups including the United Way of York Region, United Way of Peel, Louise Rousseau's WAVE, the Canadian Breast Cancer Foundation, For Youth Initiative, Media Action, formerly Media Watch, and others. I've also sat on the board of directors of many organizations across the Greater Toronto Area. Looking at the experience I previously listed, one might think that I have some form of formal post-secondary education in social work or sociology, which has often been a requirement at the master's level for some of the positions that I've held. But the reality is that I've been working since I was 16 years of age due to family circumstances. This means that I began working right out of high school and have continued to work full-time since. Is that a problem? It depends on how you look at it. Did it mean that I had to work harder to prove myself, even with my experiences and proven skill set, compared to someone who had a degree? Yes, definitely. Did it mean that when someone asked me the question about where I had studied that I felt uncomfortable? Yes. But did it prevent me from experiencing all that I did? No, not at all. Would life have been easier if I had a degree? Perhaps, but that's a question that really can't be answered. This quote probably best sums up how I surmounted the hurdles brought on by not having formal post-secondary education. The positive thinker sees the invisible, feels the intangible, and achieves the impossible. Anonymous. So I didn't go to school in the formal or traditional sense, but I did have the opportunity to educate myself through participating in a number of leadership training and development opportunities. I was both honored and privileged to be a part of such programs as the United Way of Toronto's City Leaders Creative Institute for Toronto's Young Leader, and the Maitrey Foundation's Leaders for Change, as well as being a Civic Action Diverse City Fellow in 2010. These opportunities not only expanded my networks further, they gave me the tools to really evaluate myself, my leadership style, and how others perceive me as a leader. It was great to be a part of a group of individuals from various sectors who simply were present to connect and build the city. City builders that wanted to leave their mark, not for their own benefit, but to leave lasting change in Toronto for the better. What I found most fascinating about participating in these programs was working with and meeting such accomplished and amazing individuals involved in social justice work who simply try to improve the lives of others. Meeting them was such a humbling experience. Not only because you see that gleam in their eyes as they start talking about an issue that they're passionate about, but also because we all seem to have one thing in common, and that is faith or hope. There are many examples I can give where we met and heard from those in leadership positions who shared their leadership journeys with us. One such individual is Mr. John Tory. John, like other leaders whom we had a chance to get up close and personal with during our Fellows program in 2010, was willing to answer any questions that we had for him. For me, the burning question was inspiration. What was it that made John start his journey? Who or what was his inspiration? John gave us his story of working with his father and how a simple phone call canvassing members for the Conservatives put him on his path to leadership. Listening to him got me thinking that it only takes a moment for someone to realize that this is what I enjoy doing and why I feel the way I do about a particular role, cause, or issue. Then it's about making up your mind, taking one step forward, and having faith that your journey is meant to take you in a particular direction, whatever that may be. From there, your life begins to change. Slowly but surely, you start to find opportunities, and it feels like doors swing open as you walk by. All you have to do is choose which one to walk through. An excellent quote that really speaks to this is by Wilfred A. Peterson. Explore your mind, discover yourself, and then give the best that is in you to your age and to your world. There are heroic possibilities waiting to be discovered in every person. What's interesting is that no one is really able to explain what that strong faith or belief is in, just that there's something higher that's keeping us moving. To me, that higher purpose, that higher being is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To others, there may be other names that they use, and that's perfectly all right. What's important is that we believe in something and we acknowledge its existence, because whether we realize it or not, or whether we want to believe it or not, our life isn't in our hands. Ultimately, it's in His. All we can do is have faith and work hard in the direction that we feel is appropriate. The outcome is completely in His hands. So how is this all relevant to reevaluating your life's purpose? Well, for one, it's important to know what makes you tick, how you can go about making that real, and who to surround yourself with, just so that your dream actually becomes a reality. That's just what I did in my career path in the not-for-profit sector. But beyond the not-for-profit sector, I also had a choice to make about my life and my story, which is why I took it upon myself to share my own personal story. I published my experience in the form of a book and an audio program, which is titled From Behind the Veil, A Hijabi's Journey to Happiness, which includes an attack post 9/11 that was gendered Islamophobia, and the impact this attack had on my life. Having experienced what I did, my physical, emotional, and spiritual health deteriorated, and I spent the next 10 years struggling to walk the path to healing and recovery. So why did I feel that it was necessary for me to share my personal story with the world? I felt it was a vehicle to empower others to speak up about their own experiences, and for them to know that they're not alone. As long as someone can relate to even a word of what I've said, I've done my job. It wasn't about selling books or making money. It never was and still isn't. It's about sharing a message and connecting people with that message so that they can then share it with others. My new journey began in March 2010. I published my book and officially launched it to my family, friends, the angels that touched my life, and the media. On the day of my book launch, I still remember the thoughts that were going through my mind. I had envisioned and dreamed about this day, this moment so many times before, imagining what it would be like when I'd step onto the podium and thank all those who touched my life in some way. But I don't recall ever thinking what would happen once I stepped off or what the next step in my life would be now that I had achieved a goal that I had been working on for so long. When I made that step onto the podium, a strange feeling overtook me and my mind went blank. Was this what I was meant to feel like? This is the beginning of a new road, but where does it lead? Where do I go from here? Did I really not even imagine what the next step would look like? Was I really that focused on publishing this book that I left everything else aside? That night, as we left the hotel and my friends took me out for Chinese, as I was driving down the streets of Mississauga on my way to the restaurant that I had agreed to meet them at, I thought to myself, this moment will never come back, and that moving forward I would need to begin this new journey of learning and finding myself on my own. And to do that, it would take me time. I promised myself that I would keep writing, but not to write another book immediately, but rather to keep track of my experiences, so that at some point in the future, perhaps 5 to 10 years later, I would consider publishing again, sharing with those who supported me the first time where I was at and how my life had changed yet again. Not once did I think that life had so much in store for me sooner than I expected and in such a short period of time. The very next morning, I woke up in a bit of a daze. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't really know what or even where to begin. So I decided to spend the next 2 days just thinking, contemplating what I had achieved and where I wanted to go next. Anyone who knows me knows that brainstorming and mind mapping are processes that I take very seriously. So out came the art paper, which I love writing on because I see it as a clear canvas with no restrictions. Even just lines on a paper can prevent your mind from really reaching out. And my cheap but very well loved used writing blue ballpoint pen. I started by listing all the things that I had accomplished. This list included the places I worked, the personal things I did such as buying a home, a car, etc., and then my leadership opportunities and the projects that I had successfully completed to date. After much thought and reflection, I felt as though I had done a lot, but not a lot for myself. At age 30, I really had very little to show for all the work I had done. I was not being regretful. How can I regret something I consciously made the decision to do? Ultimately, you can be disappointed at the outcome, but regretting the decision to act is something that I personally don't understand. I was very content with what I did for others, but the question still remained, what did I do for myself? And as that thought came into my mind, I felt a sudden and acute sense of exhaustion, a feeling of sheer fatigue from my life and what I had completed in 30 years, of which 14 to 15 years were simply a blur because of family responsibilities, work, and volunteer experiences. But now things would be different. I decided I was going to take care of me. I'd spent far too much of my life helping and serving others, but in many ways the reality was that I did so at my own expense. Everyone else would have to wait until I could figure out who I was and what I was meant to do for me. And so now, having completed my first book and closing that chapter of my life, I was ready to move forward and search for me, starting on a new journey and finding a new path. But the question still remained, how was I going to do this? Since I learned all my lessons by meeting people in some fashion, I was curious at who I would meet this time around and what the future had in store for me. The reality is that sometimes we don't realize our life is about to change. Our plans lead us to something, but the outcome is completely different. I had great plans going back to school, traveling, and working in a management position in a grassroots agency, applying all the things that I'd been doing as a consultant for so long, all of which I hoped would bring me to finding Farheen. With that in mind, I decided to start my plan of action and start pursuing all of my goals. But there was a slight difference in my approach this time. I would do what I had to do, but would leave my life open to new possibilities that perhaps I couldn't comprehend or imagine at this point in time. Somewhere deep down inside, I was hoping the answer would come to me in a way that I could easily recognize, and then I would begin working towards whatever I was meant to do, like I had in the past. But that didn't stop me from trying, and I did. Some of my plans were successful, others were completely off the charts with unexpected outcomes. The Finding Farheen piece really led me to some challenging places, and my identity was certainly tested when I started working with a group of feminists to save a rape crisis center that was on the verge of closing. Standing up for women's rights was certainly something that was dear to me, especially for women who were survivors of sexual assault and/or rape. However, it was a difficult place to work when my boundaries were pushed each and every day, where every day I would be challenged about my faith, my identity, the way I dress, my thought process, the way I saw myself versus how others perceived me, and the way that my religion was playing a role in oppressing women globally. I had to unravel a lot of stereotypes, myths, and realities. I had to learn the difference between organized religion and spirituality, between feminism and femininity, between human rights and anti-oppression, anti-racism, and what it meant to be a survivor of violence. Towards the end of the 1-year period that I was there and was able to successfully raise the amount of funds necessary to keep their doors open, I realized that in finding Farheen, I had completely neglected myself and my health. I was an angry, isolated, bitter young woman who was ready to paint all men with the same brushstroke, as having a tendency for violent behavior, which had ruined the lives of so many women. And again, I was exhausted. My family was far from my sight at this point as well, as I had put them on hold too, with my only focus for the last 11 months being the agency and the women. So how did I get on this path again, and did I really find what I was looking for? No, in fact, I think I was more confused now than before. Great. That's not very helpful. Now what do? I was upset, angry, and very frustrated. I felt so overwhelmed that my tears just started to flow, and for the first time in a long time, I felt as though I was in touch with my inner self. Something that I'd almost numbed out completely because of the place in which I was. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dear God, now what do? Only you can guide me through this. There must be something good in this. I'm sure you're preparing me for something, but the question is what, and when will I know what it's for? Clearly, I was upset and down in the dumps. My folks could see that I was close to an emotional breakdown, but I had pushed myself so far away from everyone that I didn't even know how to reach out and ask for help. I was afraid to let anyone in. Even in the midst of it all, I didn't lose faith or hope, and that had a lot to do with my past experiences. If there was only one thing I learned in my previous journey, it was that when things get tough, that's when we really need to put our faith in God, Allah. Patience is a virtue. They say it's the only way we can keep ourselves sane when we're surrounded by chaos, and only He can help you through the toughest of situations. We're but mere human beings, and we can only work from within our box, the restrictions of our mind, but God Almighty is the creator of all things. He can and always will think way beyond what we can imagine, and is aware of how each of us operate in our circle of life, influence, etc. Let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do the thinking and the work. Just have faith in Him. That's all we can really do when you can't find any answers. It's like Dennis Waitley said, as long as we're persistent in our pursuit of our deepest destiny, we'll continue to grow. We cannot choose the day or time when we'll fully bloom. It happens in its own time. Chapter 2. Opening yourself to possibilities. Letting life take its course. Your living is determined not so much by what life brings to you, as by the attitude you bring to life. Not so much by what happens to you, as by the way your mind looks at what happens. Unknown. Life's lessons. Life doesn't always go as planned. Always remain positive. Live life knowing that there are endless possibilities and allow it to take its course. Live and think from the heart. Don't overanalyze or overthink. Just be. After a year of extremely hard work and loads of loo time accumulated from 16 and 18-hour workdays, I decided to take some time off to reevaluate yet again what I wanted to do with my life. I asked for a few weeks vacation and decided to take it easy and just sit around the house doing absolutely nothing, hoping that by doing this something would materialize, something that was probably staring me in the face, but that I just hadn't noticed yet. It was in these 3 weeks I realized just how lonely I was in life, and that even though I was continuously working and caregiving to those around me, at this age or stage of life, I really didn't have any plans for myself other than work and more work. The thought of settling down or starting a family of my own was something I would love to do, but it didn't feel or seem realistic to me at this point in time. My family, in particular my parents and my best friend Sanjita, were convinced otherwise. They were determined to find someone for me. They were convinced that I had struggled so much in life that someone was just around the corner, and before I knew it, my journey of love and laughter would begin. I wasn't so sure that that was the case, but I was grateful for their blessings and their positive thoughts. In thinking about it further, it was clear to me that in the past, I hadn't taken the time to consider finding a life partner because I was not completely well physically or emotionally enough to share someone else's feelings. God knows my parents did try, Making a commitment is something very serious. If I couldn't take care of myself, how on earth would I take care of him? And now in this present moment, I didn't feel that I could find someone who would appreciate me for who I was and what I stood for and the work I do in the community, especially since I've been so vocal about my experiences in life. And besides, regardless of what I think, marriage may no longer be an option for me because I had hit 30. And in the South Asian community, this was when you're considered to be too old for marriage. Not forgetting that finding a life partner would mean that I would have to allow myself to trust and be vulnerable. For someone like me, who has always been the strong person, the caregiver, that would definitely pose a challenge. And if that wasn't enough, because of the nature of my past experiences, I operated out of a bubble, my own personal space, which was very dear to me, and that I would not allow anyone to enter without my permission. This too would have to be slowly lowered, and that again was a path down which I wasn't prepared to walk, at least not at this point, or so I thought. The nature of my work didn't help the situation at all. In fact, I started feeling even more resentful towards men, and it was easy for me to start to stereotype all men negatively. My parents continued to try to encourage me to consider marriage and even offered for me to find my own partner and bring him to them. I could have easily done this in the past, had I wanted to take that route, but I was not ready for a relationship, nor was I interested in finding my own partner. In fact, if and when I was ready, I'd prefer an arranged marriage simply because it was closer to the values and traditions that I had seen growing up, but more importantly because it was someone who I knew was there to seriously consider marriage. I had seen many of my friends go through relationships where they were unsure if the man was actually willing to commit or not, and the heartaches that went with it, which I found to be very problematic. The idea of looking at arranged marriage too posed some questions which were interesting to deal with. For example, among my circle of friends and colleagues, was Farheen going to go through an arranged process? The very thing that she is challenging by sitting on forums and networks that oppose forced marriage and honor killings, which often are based in an arranged marriage process? Was Farheen Khan willing to answer to the world about her decision to find a life partner if that happened, and how would she be able to justify her actions marrying someone who in many ways is a total stranger, especially after seeing all the different situations where men take advantage of women? Was she prepared to take on another person in her life and still do the activist work that she was doing? Or was this the end of Farheen Khan, the activist as we know her? These were some of the conversations that I was hearing through the grapevine. All valid concerns and questions, but were they relevant? Not necessarily, because I wasn't planning to get married anyway. I figured that I would cross that bridge when I came to it. Why stress over something that isn't even on your radar, right? Wrong. Anyway, back to my 3-week vacation. Besides sitting at home, the only other thing I did was go out and do some speaking engagements talking about my experience. I learned to deal with my emotions as I spoke and started to embrace what was my own in it, while allowing others to be vulnerable around me and sharing their own experiences. In some ways, this process of speaking was cathartic for me, as it allowed me to put my own experience into perspective, learning from many other people just how patient and resilient they were, having gone through much worse than I could have ever imagined. One night, as I was sitting at the dining table, my mother came over to me and said that she had started a marriage bureau. I was shocked. "Why would you do that, Mom? Please don't tell me you're doing this for me," were the first words that came out of my mouth. My mother, who was quite excited, suddenly became a bit quiet. I rolled my eyes and said, "Okay, Mother, go ahead, I'm listening." And with that, the smile returned to her face, and she told me that she had started this process to help people. Not just me, but all these young people who weren't willing to find their own partner, but would prefer being matched. The process is based on consent, or marzi, as she would say in Urdu. It means your own free will. You decide if you want to pursue the relationship further. There's no compulsion, pressure, or coercion. I listened to what she had to say, gave her my thoughts and best wishes, and went off to my bedroom to sleep. The next day, my mother came to me again. Same situation, same time, same scene. "Yes, Mother, what's going on?" was my question to her. And again, with a huge smile on her face, she said, "I have something to tell you." Oh no. How did I know she was going to say that? And before long, she had started telling me about this guy, this young man that she had met and that she felt was extremely compatible with me. "Please, beta, daughter, Listen to me, I think he's a great guy and you should meet him, at least once. I told her I would think about it and returned to my room to sleep.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?